and hopefully you will forgive me after you see today's session, inshallah. I don't know where to start. Maybe I should start by asking Let's Academy for having me tonight. Alhamdulillah. And I should start by thanking you guys for showing up. See some of the names here. I know Nomaha, of course. Ahmed, my pleasure, Ahmed. Happy to see you. I know, who else do I know? Let me go through the names. You guys remind me yourselves.
Mohamed Noor here. He was speaking.
Oh no, mashallah. Okay, no wonder I'm going through the names. I don't want to be checked. Okay, mashallah. Beautiful, beautiful, mashallah. Anyways, so guys, today's presentation is not going to be much interactive. I don't know if you did attend any of my sessions before. It will be a solo play, unfortunately. But I hope and I promise, inshallah, that you will love it. Today's presentation, as you may know, Mohammed maybe told you, is titled, this disappear. That's Cooperative Learning. Don't crash that plane. What is it that I want to do tonight exactly? My objectives tonight are very simple. I have only one objective, actually, the two, but they're one. If you're not using cooperative learning, I hope that by the end of today's session, you will think again and start using it. And I hope that if you are using it, inshallah you are, today's session will deepen your conviction of the method and will equip you with ideas to rightly defend your methodology and invite people to jump on the ship as well and start using cooperative learning. I will try to show you how ignoring cooperative teaching at schools can have detrimental consequences outside of school. And I will do this by telling you stories and eliciting lessons from stories. Today's stories come mostly from Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers. It's really, guys, it's a must read. If you're a teacher or if you're not a teacher, you have to get this book and you have to read it. It's available on Amazon. And if you go to YouTube, you will find the audiobook as well. Okay, now let's jump straight to our first story. Now we are in January 1990, about 30 years ago. We are in the cockpit of the Columbia Air Avianca Flight 052. The captain of the plane, the person on the left, is Loreno Caviadas, and his first officer on the captain is on the right, and the first officer on the left is Mauricio Clark. And they were en route from Millan. This is how they say it in Spanish anyways. Medellin in Colombia to Kennedy Airport in New York. We all know Kennedy Airport, one of the busiest airports in the world. The weather, unfortunately, the weather that night was very poor. It was foggy and it was very, very windy. And actually, the weather was so bad that 203 flights were delayed at Newark Airport in New Jersey. 200 flights were delayed at LaGuardia Airport in New York, 161 at Philadelphia, 53 at Boston's Logan Airport, and 99 at Kennedy. So many delays that night. Because of the weather, Avianca, the Columbia one that we're talking about, was held up in the air by air traffic controller, ATC. Let's remember this, ATC is air traffic controller, 3 times on its way to New York. One time over Norfolk, as you can see on the screen, in Virginia, and that was for 19 minutes. And then another one above Atlantic City for 29 minutes, and for 40 miles south of Kennedy Airport, the one that they were heading to, for 29 minutes. And after 1 hour and about 1 hour and 15 minutes, about 80 minutes, Avianca was cleared for landing, and the plane was doing a wide circle over Long Island. Long Island is in New York. And if you've ever been on a plane before, you know, airplanes tend to do this circle and then land. Now, while they were doing so, suddenly, one of the plane's engines failed. That plane had 4 engines. Seconds later, a second engine failed. Show me the runway. The pilot was crying out. Cavieras was shouting, hoping desperately that he was close enough to Kennedy to somehow glide the crippled airplane and land safely. But Kennedy was 16 miles away, and his old 707 slammed down, killing 73 passengers of the 158 passengers they had on board. The American National Transportation Safety Board and to investigate and write the initial report on a plane crash to, you know, to say what exactly happened. But in our case here, it didn't take him that long. They actually determined the cause of the crash only 1 day after the crash. It was fuel exhaustion. They ran out of fuel. They didn't have any fuel. The engine stopped working because they didn't have any fuel and they crashed. Nothing wrong with the airplane, nothing wrong with the plane, with the airport, absolutely nothing wrong. Now, imagine if I were to tell you now that I'm moving from one city to the other, from Jeddah to, say, Medina, or from Cairo to Alexandria, or something like this, and I tell you that I ran out of gas, you know, my car stopped because I didn't have enough gas. I mean, wouldn't you call me an idiot? How did this happen? Can't you see the gauges? So how can an airplane crash because it didn't have enough gas? The best person to explain what happened that night is a Sri Lankan veteran pilot by the name of Seren Ratwari, who worked for Emirates Airlines. And Emirates Airlines, as we all know it, is one of the best airliners ever. Ratwari is not only a veteran pilot, and by the way, he is now the CEO of Sri Lankan Airlines. But anyways, back then, when he was telling us the explanation, he was still a pilot. He is not only a pilot, but he's also a researcher in human factors. And what is that human factors? That is the analysis of how human beings interact with complex systems, like nuclear power plants and airplanes and these complex systems, how humans handle these things. Ratwari explained that there were many preconditions for the crash. A strong wind, a minor technical malfunction with the autopilot. They didn't have the autopilot, it was not functioning. The 3 long delays, you know, they had 3 holding patterns, we call them, and all of these actually, you know, led to fuel exhaustion. They were doing the long patterns for 80 minutes at a low altitude, and at a low altitude you burn more gas, actually more than if you're flying up, you know, with the clouds. And there is another problem with the plane itself. That plane was a 707. 707 is an old airplane. It was built in the 50s and continued, you know, up to the 70s. That particular airplane was about 22 years old. Flying the 707 is a lot of work. That's Ratwati. He explains that. You know, the flight controls are not hydraulically powered. They're actually connected by a series of pulleys and pull rods to the physical metal surface of the airplane itself. So you have to be quite strong to fly the airplane. It's like rowing a boat. It takes that much, you know, power, and it makes you that exhausted, really. When Ratwari gave that explanation, that was a few years ago, he had just landed a jumbo jet at Kennedy Airport after a long flight from Dubai. Ratwari said, my current airplane, I fly with my fingertips. I use a joystick, like, you know, the one that our kids use for playing Xbox and Sony PlayStation stuff. My instruments in his 737 are huge. The 707, the Avianca one, the instruments are tiny, the size of a coffee cup, super tiny. So the captain had to do so many things now. He had to keep looking around, you know, these tiny gadgets and instruments. His right hand was controlling the speed. His left hand was flying the airplane. It was a lot of work for the captain. And actually, the black box, which was recovered from the crash site, had plenty of evidence that the captain was actually maxed out. In the final hour of the flight, the captain is heard to repeatedly ask for the directions from the ATC to be translated in Spanish. You know, Colombia, they speak Spanish, as if he had no energy to make use of his English anymore. And on 9 occasions, he asked for directions to be repeated. He went like, tell me things louder. I'm not hearing them. I'm not hearing them. The plane was circling for 40 minutes, only 60 miles away from Philadelphia. And every single one of the 3 people in the cockpit knew that they were running out of fuel. But the pilot failed to ask to land in Philadelphia. And the other people in the cockpit never mentioned it either. So what is going on? What was the first pilot doing? Claude's, what was he doing really? The first officer, Claude's, his responsibility was to actually conduct all the communication with the ATC. So his role that night was absolutely critical because he was the one who was going to take the clearance to land the plane. But his behavior was oddly passive. And we will talk a lot about Claude's tonight. It wasn't until the 3rd halting pattern near Kennedy Airport that Claude's told ATC for the first time that night that he didn't think the plane had enough fuel to reach an alternative airport. When did he bring up that issue of fuel again? 38 minutes after that. You know, throughout their critical moments up in the air, the cockpit was filled with heavy silence. They were not talking as much. To Ratwari, you know, the veteran air pilot from Emirates Airlines, that silence in the cockpit had no sense. Let's listen to what, you know, Ratwari says to explain what happened that night. Let me get the papers to read. I'm sorry, just 1 second, to read what he had to say exactly. Okay. So this is how Ratwari explains it. He says, we had this lady in the back. Ratwari, as I said, was just landed, you know, a jumbo jet. So compare what happened with Avianca 056 to what happened with Ratwari in his trip from Dubai to Kennedy. He was saying, we had that lady in the back. We reckon she was having a stroke, heart attack. She was seizing, she was vomiting, and she was in a very bad shape. She was an Indian lady, and her daughter lived in the States. Her husband spoke no English, and he spoke no Hindi, and he spoke only Punjabi. They had absolutely no money at all, and it was impossible to communicate with them. By that time, Gatwari was actually flying over Moscow when the lady had that heart attack. He was flying over Moscow. But he knew that for those people, he could not go to Moscow. I said to the first officer, it's just Swati speaking now. I said to the first officer, you fly that plane, we have to go to Helsinki. So he made up his mind not to land in Moscow. He was going to go to Helsinki. The immediate problem that Ratwari faced that night was that They were less than half the way from Dubai to Kennedy, which means they had a lot more fuel in their tanks, a lot more than for the plane to land safely, right? So he's saying we were 60 tons over maximum landing weights. You have the maximum landing weight. You cannot be over that. He was 60 tons overweight. And I had to make a choice. I could dump the fuel, so he could have dumped that fuel, right? But the ATC were going to send him to the Baltic Sea to do so. And it would have taken him 40 minutes to come back and land, which means that lady might have died. So he decided to land anyways. Now, compare everything that I'm telling you with what Klotz was doing in that Avianca flight. Now, in the aviation industry, the term used for, what Ratwari was doing is called landing heavy. Landing heavy means the automated landing system couldn't be used because it was not set up to land and handle a plane with so much weight. So Ratwari actually took over the controls himself. Landing heavy is extremely challenging, even for a veteran pilot like Ratwari. There are two contradicting factors. First, he had to ensure that the airplane touched down very, very softly, because otherwise there was a risk of damaging that very expensive airplane. But on the other hand, if he could not touch down, if he cleared the runway and had to go around, the extra weight would have crippled the plane and he wouldn't have enough thrust to fly back up, which means he was going to crash. So in other words, he had only one attempt and it had to be the right one. How frustrating. Now, because this flight from Dubai to Kennedy is a long flight, he had two other pilots in the cockpit. So he woke them up from their nap, they were sleeping, and they got involved in doing everything as well. Actually, landing was not, the only challenge for Ratwati and his crew. There were many other challenges. He's never been to Helsinki before. He had no idea how the airport was, no idea whether the runways there were long enough for him to land heavy. He had to find an approach, find out if they could land there, and figure out the performance parameter. All this while he was talking to many different people simultaneously. He was talking to his supervisors in Dubai, talking to Midlink, which is a service in Arizona that was with them on the radio to check on the lady. And he was talking to the doctors, attending to the lady in the back, and he was talking to his co-pilots as well. All of this was nonstop for 40 minutes. In the end, luckily, the weather was very good in Helsinki, and trying to do an approach in bad weather plus the heavy weight plus unfamiliar airport wouldn't have been very good for them. So they landed safely. Finland, first world country, they were very, very well set up. They were very flexible. He told them, I am landing heavy and I need to land in the opposite direction of the wind. So he had to, in addition to everything else that he was doing on that flight, he had to do that as well. He had to talk them through landing him against the wind. Usually when an airplane lands, it lands with the wind. But because he's landing heavy, he wants to land against the wind. So he had to talk about that too, to the ATC in Helsinki. Now, after all this talking, very rapid, sorry for that, got really enthusiastic. I want you to think for a minute about what was required of Ratwari of that flight. He had to be a very good pilot. That goes without much saying. He had to have all the technical skills to land. But almost everything that Ratwari did to make that emergency landing a success fell outside that strict definition of piloting skills. He had to weigh the risk of damaging his airplane against the risk of a woman's life. And then, once the choice was made, he had to think through the implications of Helsinki versus Moscow. The sick passenger in the back versus Moscow for that passenger, that he had on board. He had to educate himself very quickly on the parameters of the airport that he has never been to or landed in before. Could that airport handle that huge airplane that's a Jean Piaget 737, with 60 tons overweight? But most of all, what he had to do, he had to be a very, very good communicator. He had to talk to the passengers. He had to talk to the doctors, to the co-pilots, to the second crew member who just woke up from the nap, to his supervisors back in Dubai, to the ATC in Helsinki, to Midlink, all of this while being in that very stressful situation. So it's safe to say that for 40 minutes, the pass between the passenger stroke and the landing in Helsinki, there were not more than a handful seconds of silence in the cockpit. What was required of Ratwari was that he communicates, and not just communicates in the sense of issuing commands to his co-pilots, but he had also to give that sense of encouraging, cajoling people, calming others, negotiating, sharing information, all in the clearest and the most transparent manner possible. It was communication skill, we must safely say, that saved the day for Ratwari that day. But for Avianca, the flight that we started talking about, 052, they were unlucky to have the pilots, both of them, who did not communicate well. So does that ring a bell? When we talk about very good communication, what style of teaching jumps into your brain now? We have three styles of teaching. We have cooperative, we have individualistic, and we have competitive. So which one is the one in which you communicate and you share information, you cajole and you sympathize, and which one? Anyways, we'll come back to this again. Now, here, by contrast, is the transcript from the Avianca 052. As the plane is flying its final holding pattern before crashing, the issue was the weather. So the fog was so thick that Klotz and Caviadas could not figure out where they were. They could not see the runway. Now, here is the transcript. This is exactly the words that came out of their mouths. I'll read them out now. I want you to pay close attention, and in particular, to the lengths of silence between what they said, their utterances. And I want you to pay attention also to the final sentence or the final response that Klotz gave. Now, Caviadas, the runway, where is it? I don't see it. I don't see it. 10 seconds pass. Caviadas, seemingly speaking to himself, we don't have fuel. 17 seconds pass as the pilots give technical instructions to each other. Caviadas, I don't know what happened with the runway. I don't see it. Klotz, the first pilot, Klotz, I don't see it. Now, ATC now jumps in and tells them to make a left turn. Caviadas, the captain, Caviadas, tell him we are in an emergency. Now, Klotz, speaking to the ATC, to the air traffic controller. Now, listen very carefully to this sentence. That's right, to 180 on the heading, and we're running out of fuel. Now, I want you to imagine the scene in the cockpit. the plane is dangerously low on fuel. They have no idea how much longer the airplane is capable of flying. The captain is desperate. He's saying, tell him we are in an emergency. And what does Claude say? That's right, 2180 on the heading, and we're running out of fuel. Now, let's analyze this sentence, and please listen very carefully. To begin with, that first part, the phrase, we're running out of fuel, has absolutely no meaning in air traffic control terminology. All planes, as they approach their destinations, are by definition running out of fuel. So did Klotz mean that 052 had no enough fuel to make it to another alternative airport? Did he mean that they were beginning to get worried about their fuel level? Next, consider the structure of the critical sentence. Klotz begins with a routine acknowledgement of the instructions from ATC, and he doesn't mention his concern about the fuel until the second half of the sentence. You can see the sentence on the screen. That's exactly what he said. It's as if you were to say in a restaurant, yes, I will have some more coffee, and I'm choking on a chicken bone. How seriously would the waiter take you? If you were choking on a chicken bone, you're suffocating, you're gonna die. You'd be shouting and kicking for help. You don't say, I'm choking on a chicken bone. So the traffic controller with whom Klotz was speaking that moment testified later on that he took that we are running out of fuel as a passing comment. That's just a passing comment. On stormy nights, air traffic controllers hear pilots talking about running out of fuel all the time. Now, even the and I underlined it for you, and I made it bold-faced on the screen, that that Klotz inserted between the two parts of the sentences only served to undercut the importance of what he was trying to say. Another controller who actually handled 052 that night said that Klotz always spoke in a very nonchalant manner. There was no urgency in his voice. Now, this very sentence on the screen now, linguists have a term to describe it. They call it mitigated speech. So what is mitigated speech? Mitigated speech is when you are trying to downplay the meaning of something that you are trying to say. So let me give you an example. Now, you are at your school or at your work, and you want your boss to do you a favor. So you don't say to your boss, I will need this by Sunday. You don't say that, of course. You mitigate. So you say, don't bother if it's too much work, but if you have the chance to look over it, over the weekend, I'll really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. So playing down, speech like this is called mitigation. And mitigating when speaking to your boss is actually appropriate. But in that cockpit, that night, it was a fatal mistake. Mitigating in the aviation industry is a very, very serious problem. Combating mitigation has become one of the greatest battles in the commercial aviation industry in the history of the industry. They're trying to fight mitigation. Every major airline now has what they call the crew resource management training. And that is, a set of designed instructions to teach junior crew members how to communicate clearly and assertively. So, for example, many airliners now teach a standardized procedure for co-pilots to challenge the pilot if he or she thinks that there was something terribly wrong. This is what they say. Captain, I'm concerned about. Then, Captain, I'm uncomfortable with. And if the captain is still, doesn't respond, Captain, I believe the situation is unsafe. And if all these fail, then the first officer is required by law to take over the airplane. Aviation experts tell us that it is the success of the war on mitigation. Again, mitigation is how people, play down what they say. It's the war against mitigation that actually, more than anything else, extraordinarily caused the decline in airplane accidents. So our airplanes are safer now because aviation actually fought mitigation. Okay. Now, in Emirates Airlines, for example, they actually insist that the co-pilots and the captain, no matter, what the age gap between them, no matter what the ranks between them are, that they address one another by the first name. So Abdullah and Ahmed, they don't have captain or they don't have any of these titles. And Ratwari explains that this actually helps because it's a lot easier to say, Ali, you're doing something wrong, other than saying, Ahmed, you're doing something wrong. It's a lot easier to say, Ahmed, you're doing something wrong. Now, back to, the very sad story of the Avianca 052. Now, the plane is attempting to land. Glotz is on the radio with the ATC, trying to figure out when they can try to land. So Caviedes, the person on the right, the captain, turns to Glotz and says, advise them we are in an emergency. Now, 4 seconds of silence pass. Then the captain tries again. Did you tell him? Glotz, yes, sir. I already advised them. Now, Glotz talking to the ATC, going over routine details, and then he says, 150, maintaining 2000, Avianca 052 heavy, and then Caviedes interrupts. Advise him we don't have fuel. So Glotz gets back to radio and speaks to the ATC and says, climb and maintain 3000, and we're running out of fuel, sir. Now here it is again. Not mentioning the magic word emergency, which is what air traffic controllers are trained to listen for. Just running out of fuel, sir. And at the end of a sentence, which is preceded by the mitigating, Now Caviedes says, did you already advise that we don't have fuel? Glotz, yes, sir. I advised him. Caviedes says, bueno. Bueno in Spanish means thank you. I know we can't imagine a conversation like this is actually happening, going on, while both pilots and the engineer sitting in the back, all of them know that they are dangerously out of fuel. It's downright ridiculous. If you are watching, a movie for Adil Imam, it would have been more serious than this. Now, 1 full minute passes. ATC, air traffic controllers, and Avianca 025 heavy, I'm going to bring you about 15 miles northeast, and then turn you back onto the approach. Is that okay with you and your fuel? Glotz, what does he say? I guess so. Thank you very much. I guess so. Thank you very much. Their plane is about to crash. After that, 5 minutes pass. There is radio chatter and routine business, and then the flight engineer in the back cries out, flame out on engine number 4. Caviedes says, show me the runway. But the runway is 16 miles away. ATC, for the last time, You have enough fuel to make it to the airport. No response. The transcript ends. The plane crashed. Now, the thing you have to understand about the crash, let's hear this from Ratwadi. He explains it that in New York, the air traffic controllers are famous for being rude. They are aggressive and bullying. They are also very good because they handle, you know what Kennedy Airport is like, maybe you have heard of it. They handle a phenomenal amount of traffic in a very constrained environment. They are unbelievable. The way they see it, the air traffic controller says that, look, I am in control. You are the pilot. Shut up and do what I'm telling you to do. And they might snap at you. And if you don't like it, you snap back at them. And if you don't snap back at them, they will railroad you. يفرموك فرم. They will railroad you. Now, it's all in the spirit, you know. If you're not used to that sort of give and take, New York ATC can be very, very scary and intimidating. And those Avianca guys were just very intimidated by the interaction. It's impossible to imagine that Ratwadi would be not being able to make his case, you know, to those guys sitting in the towers. You know, if Ratwadi needed help in the cockpit, he would, you know, wake up the co-pilots. Uh, if uh, if if he thought, you know, Moscow was not appropriate, you know, he will go to Helsinki. If Helsinki was going to bring him with the wind, he will talk them, you know, through bringing him, you know, against the wind. In short, Ratwadi is a good communicator and a real team player, but Klotz had communication issues. And what the Avianca crew needed to do, all what they needed to do was just to say, we don't have the fuel to do what you're asking us to do, sir. We have to land in the coming 10 minutes, 15 minutes. But they actually were unable to get this message across to the ATC. Now, to understand why Klotz failed, we need to learn about something called the Power Distance Index, or PDI. PDI was designed by the Dutch psychologist Piet Hofstede. Pictures on the screen. The PDI is concerned with people's attitudes towards hierarchy and how much respect they have for authority. So in countries with low PDI, people underplay their power. So they address each other by name. So you can address the prime minister by his or her name. It's normal to find the prime minister, you know, cycling, and we have all seen this, or maybe wearing shorts and, you know, a t-shirt. But in countries with high PDI, individuals cannot challenge superiors. There are only strict commands, and those commands are issued by their leaders. Now, can you see the index on the screen? Where do you think the USA is on this index? America, those people in the ATC that night. America is here. America is 40. And where's Colombia? Colombia is 67 on the index. So this can explain the interaction. What happened was that night, Klotz sees himself as a subordinate to the people in the ATC. So it's not his job to solve that crisis. It's a captain's job, and the captain is exhausted, is not saying anything. Now, those people in the ATC are asking him, you know, to go around and so on. And Klotz is trying to communicate to them, you know, his misery, his problems. but he uses mitigation. Now you should understand what mitigation is. So he is speaking with mitigation as if he's speaking to a superior. So this is his way because of his PDI, you know. But the controllers who are 40 on the PDI, they don't have any power distances between them. They're not Colombians like him. They're from low power distance New York, you know. They don't see any hierarchical gap between themselves and the pilots up in the air. So mitigated speech to them doesn't mean that the person is being polite with them as superiors. It actually means that the pilot doesn't have any problems. Now, one last point in the script that I will read for you now, and it's almost painful to read. And it is this part of the script that shows very evidently that the interaction between the two had a lot of intimidation, and that is what caused the airplane to fail. This is actually what happened. Captain Caviadas says to Klotz, what did he say? And Klotz says, the guy is angry. So after saying, I guess so, thank you very much, Caviadas asks him, what did the guy say? And he says, the guy is angry. So angry. Did you hear that? The guy is angry. Can you actually believe that he said that Klotz's feelings are hurt? The plane is moments from crashing, but in his mind, he tried and failed to communicate to his superiors that he had a problem. And his only conclusion is that he must have hurt and offended his superiors in the control tower. Now, our Avianca story ends here, but we need to know the implications for our classrooms. Attributing or saying that this disaster happened because of miscommunication, the way I put it now, you know, Klotz could not speak to them, might seem unbelievable. But these are not my words, actually. You know, it was actually the experts who told us that they failed and they crashed the plane because they couldn't communicate. I'm not trying to convince you to use cooperative learning with your students so that they develop their communication skills, but it is a fact. Avianca Airlines had actually 4 accidents. It was not only the one in New York, 4 accidents in quick succession. The first one was at Barranquilla. The LL in Spanish is ya, so Barranquilla, Cocota, Madrid, and New York. And in all 4, the airplanes were okay. The airports were okay. The pilots were okay. And all 4 crashes, accidents happened because of what? Miscommunication. Can you believe that? So is that really only, you know, Colombia and Colombian, you know, people because of their PDI? No. There is another incident, actually. One of the highest countries on the PDI is South Korea. And they had the same issues with communication to the extent that in the 1990s, their crash rate was 17 times higher than the international average. For time's sake, I will not tell you, you know, stories that are identical, exactly identical to Avianca's 052 flight. But Korean Air situation was so bad that their president, their then president, his name was Kim Dae-jong, he felt compelled to speak. So, and this is what he said: the issue of Korean Air is not a matter of an individual company, but a matter of a whole country. He said, our country's credibility is at stake. And after that, he actually switched his presidential plane from Korean Air to its new rival then, Asiana. So how did Korean Air solve this very terrible issue of theirs? Actually, They became very successful afterwards. Now, if you want to take Korean Air, I'm not intimidating you. It's very safe now. But how did they become so safe? Actually, what they did is that they sorted out the problem of lack of cooperation in the cockpit. In 2000, the Korean Air got an American outsider to run their flight operations. He did not fire any of the pilots or anything, right? One of the most critical things that he did was to make them communicate better. So how did he do that? He actually made sure that the pilots communicated well by giving them a checklist in English. And that checklist had all what they needed to do during critical, significant points in the flight. So in other words, what that person, he was from Delta Airline, what he did is that he gave him another identity, the one in English. And as we know, English has a low PDI. So now the pilots and the co-pilots were communicating, more confidently. And only that change actually led Korean Airlines to sort out its problem. Now, what I want to ask you, dear teachers, is if you were to board a plane, would you choose to fly with Ratwari, or would you choose to fly with clots? Now, would you like to tell me the answer? Which one? I mean, the answer is clear. You would choose to fly with Ratwari, of course. Why? Just because he is a good communicator. Now, would you like to know the PDI of all Arab countries? All Arab countries are what? Are 80. In the same band as Colombia, but on the higher end even. So, of course, I'm not saying that all individuals from our countries individually have the same PDI, but think about our students. Our students' PDI scores are not the same. Some will have high PDIs, power distance index, and some will have low. PDI is one thing that students will get to practice if you guys were to put them in groups. Yeah. Remember what Ratwari had to do. He had to encourage and convince, and calm and negotiate and share and cajole. So all of these things, our students get to do when we put them in groups, not when we make them sit individually. So do these skills remind you actually of what we do when we do cooperative learning? All of these happen when you put those kids in groups. Not when you let them sit individually, and not when you get them to compete against each other. That's even worse. When you put students in groups, there are typical soft skills that they need, to play with other people when they interact with other people. There is a dire need now, a very urgent need in our schools to apply the cooperative learning techniques today, before it's too late. In the era of artificial intelligence, now accessing information is not the problem. So if you think that by making students sit individually so that they learn, learning is not the problem, they can learn. They can learn from YouTube. They can learn from, from artificial intelligence. It's, at the click of a button, or even at the gesture of the hand. The most important thing our students need to learn now is they need to be put in a safe environment where they can actually experiment and develop their social skills. We don't want clotzes in our classrooms. We need Ratwaris in our classrooms. So how are the kids ever going to communicate if you don't put them in groups, if you ask them not to talk? Now, we did touch on things like mitigation, but mitigation is not the only thing. Mitigation and PDI, there are tons of other things, literally tons of other things that when you put students together in group, they get to practice, individualism, long-term orientation, masculinity, uncertainty, avoidance. All of these come into play when the students actually get the chance to interact with one another. So I even believe that we have not, human beings, we have not discovered everything that students benefit from when they sit together. So let me say this again. Crashes happen because pilots fail to work together as a team because of miscommunication, right? You want to know some statistics. Here are statistics. Research tells us that 44% of the plane crashes, in 44% of them, the two pilots have never flown together before. So they needed to fine tune to each other's ways. And listen to one, his name is Earl Wiener. Earl Wiener is a former chief engineer for safety at Boeing. Listen to what he said about cooperation. He said, the whole flight deck is designed and with the intention to be operated by two people. When those two people work together cooperatively, the plane is safe. Huh? Did you hear what he said? When the two people work together cooperatively. When the two people starting, one of them, the co-pilot just sits on the side and let the captain do everything, plane crash. And here is another excerpt from the book that I told you about earlier, Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. This is exactly what he said. The typical accident involves 7 consecutive human errors. Now, these 7 errors are rarely problems of knowledge or flying skill. It's not that the pilot had to negotiate difficult maneuvers or critical, technical things and fails. The kind of errors that cause airplanes to crash are invariably errors of, now listen, teamwork and cooperation. I'm making my case here. Those airplanes fail and they crash because of miscommunication. They fail because people don't work together as teams. They fail because people are not cooperating. I actually chose, this industry, aviation, because to elicit my lessons, actually, because it's a unique industry. Everything in this industry is meticulously studied and analyzed. They have engineers in all areas, but they have also psychologists. And those psychologists, listen to the black box and they analyze everything and they draw conclusions. And from those conclusions, they give us implications and lessons. And those lessons make, our flight safer. So I don't know, to be honest with you, a single other industry that does that. Only aviation does that. Everything is very meticulously analyzed. I can actually argue that in other industries, if we had that same level of meticulousness and procedures, if we were to analyze things at that level, the same problems that we found of lack of cooperative work and lack of communication would prove to be major reasons for very costly failures in those industries too. So if your students were to be encountered by the equivalents of the New York air traffic controllers in their future work as pilots and as engineers and doctors and teachers and everything, would you like your students to be like Ratwari, or would you like your students to react like clowns? Now, would you like your students to be able to talk to other people and not to be intimidated by them? Or would you like your students to mitigate and not to be able to talk to others? If you, of course, all of us would rightly choose to be like Ratwari, would you please tell me, how are you going to get your students to practice communicating with other people if all what we're doing in the classroom is asking people to sit and work alone? By not getting our students to work together, we are actually doing them a huge disservice. We are causing world tragedies similar to those of Avianca and Korean Air. The only difference is in the industry of aviation, the outcomes of the disasters are very carefully studied and they are disclosed. But the ones that we may cause when we don't put the students in groups, we may never find out about, but we actually get to see them. We actually get to see the consequences of not putting our students together in groups. We see these individually when we see all the fights that are happening on our streets, how all the misunderstandings between people. We get to see it as a country, you know, the relationships between people countrywide, and we get to see it globally when conflicts are happening now everywhere. So please make your students work together. Do not be the reason for crashing that plane. Thank you very much. Mohamed, if you're there, or Maha.
أيوة يا فندم، ازي حضرتك؟ ميرسي على المحاضرة بتاعت اليوم. ميرسي لحضرتك جدا.
Thank you very much. الله يبارك فيكي.
ربنا يكرمك. وميرسي للحضور. وإن شاء الله كل التواصل مع دكتور محمد شلبي إن شاء الله هنزلها لكم على جروب التليجرام مع السيشن إن شاء الله. كل اللينكس اللي حضرتك بعتها إن شاء الله.
Okay. Thank you, Maha.
Sure.
And this is our Telegram icon, inshallah. If you want to come to our Telegram, I will be posting, inshallah, this session as well on my Telegram. And I will be posting, you know, those who know me know that I make videos and I give live presentations and all. So I will be, inshallah, posting all of these. These are the references. This is where I got everything, guys, that I told you about today. And I highly recommend that you get this book. I highly recommend that you buy this book, The Outliers. I see somebody raised their hand. So if we may take this question, please, Maha. I think it's Dr. Hiba. Dr. Hiba, are you there?
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Yes, I did. Hello, Mr. Muhammad. I just want to tell you, it's really an extraordinary session. It's an exceptional one, wallah. It's really highly informative, and the reflection that you made and the link that you made between the pilot and the pilots and what they are doing and the students, it's really amazing. So thank you so much. I just wanted to tell you it's really an amazing session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Some resources to recommend to read. I highly recommend that you buy The Outliers. Thank you very much. True, it is. And Ms. Rahab, you need to get that book, Outliers, or listen to it on the internet. It's available as an audiobook. Thank you, Marwa. Yeah, we finished, alhamdulillah, we finished quickly. And I know, you know, some people might have not understood everything that I was saying. So inshallah, I'll try to get this session translated and then I'll post it, inshallah, on YouTube and send you the link on the Telegram channel. Or even I might try in the future to give the same presentation Arabic, inshallah. Okay. Can I leave now? Do you have anything? If you have anything, I'm here. Yes, please.
Yes. Good evening.
Yes,
good evening. First of all, thank you so much for the session. It was very lovely and I really enjoyed the topic. But I have a question related to miscommunication with the lower grades, like the KJ kids. Sometimes it happened that you cannot reach, especially for the ones who are misbehaving extreme misbehavior, and they have a problem in the hypermotion and very stubborn, and sometimes you try all the ways with them, but finally you fail really to miscommunicate with them. They have no medical issues and they are smart.
They're not ADHD or anything.
I'm sorry?
They're not ADHD.
No, they are not ADHD. They are not no. But I don't know, I have a case as a teacher. I would like to ask about it. because sometimes I suspected myself. I want to know if I have a problem miscommunicating with him, because it took a long time. And finally, I think I cannot reach him. And sometimes I did all the motivation ways with him. Sometimes even I took him aside and tried to talk in Arabic, which is something that is not allowed for English teachers, of course. But I tried to do this way. Maybe he has a problem in understanding me. But everything was, nothing happened at the end. And he is in his way. He is going in his way. And he cannot get anything. Even his behavior really affected his academic progress extremely. He has such cases. How can I deal with it?
Okay.
I know that maybe it's something for me. It's late a little bit because the year is ending. But I want to know if something like this happened again, or I faced such a situation.
This is always a recurrent problem. You will not, don't say the year is over and it's too late, because you will see this child next year. Plus every year you get the same, same cases or similar cases.
Yes. I'm saying about this child, not it's something that can be repeated. That's why I'm asking for this child.
Okay.
I think yes.
Okay. I will answer inshallah and try to be brief. I believe that what we need to start with our students with is not actually cooperative learning. This is not the beginning. All right.
Yes.
What we need to start with is behavior management.
Yes.
Behavior management is my area of expertise, actually. If do you happen to know me from before, or is it your first time to have talked to me?
The first time.
Okay, so I think, people who follow me, does anybody here know me? Know my videos about behavior management and my videos, messages to parents and to teachers and all of this. I talk about this all the time. And I will send, if you go to my, well, you call it YouTube and Instagram and everything, you will find links to my YouTube videos. So basically, my YouTube videos talk about behavior management. That's the first step. So behavior management first. And I have a unique way of doing that behavior management. And then comes cooperative learning. Cooperative learning will not work if the students are not well disciplined.
Yes.
And only disciplining the students will not make them learn. It has to be followed by cooperative learning. So these two actually go hand in hand. But the correct order, in my point of view at least, is we have to discipline the students first, behavior management, and then cooperative learning. So basically, what is wrong with you is not cooperative learning, is not your ability or anything, but it's the lack of behavior management. So behavior management is another,
another
whole
issue.
Different story. Yeah, that we can talk about, inshallah, in later on. But go watch, the videos. It's called the Best Teacher series. You will like it. And if you have any other questions, about behavior management and all, then we can talk about it, inshallah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Just one thing, last thing. I would be brief so much, but I agree, of course, with what you have said now. I totally agree. But one thing, the misbehavior or the behavior management is related also to the parents. I mean that the parents have to be in the process, or the teacher can handle it alone. Or
I'll tell you. Yeah, I'll tell you. The most important players in behavior management: number one, teacher; number two, school administration; number three, students; number four, parents. I'm not saying we don't involve the parents, that's not important, or the students, that's not important. No, you have to involve them, but it comes from a teacher, number one, from a school administration, number two. So if you're having problems with the school administration understanding what behavior management should be like, then maybe you need to attend our behavior management. Everybody needs to understand about behavior management.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much.
Egypt, Dr. Nirman. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Nirman.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. for amazing. Yeah, it was really very, very, very informative. And I would like to tell you that I'm an expert in language as effective aviation safety, and it's a topic of interest.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you. You're cutting off.
Can you hear me now?
Dr. Nirman. Now, yes, please. Go ahead, ma'am.
I was saying that I'm an expert in language as a factor in aviation safety. And I would like to add something to all what you have brought offshore, that communication, miscommunication, poor communication, lack of communication, all of these things affect the industry of aviation, and also it affects education as well, because I have the background of teaching, and also I'm a linguist and I'm specialized in aviation. So just to
MashaAllah, you specialize in aviation as well. You have a license, a pilot license.
Yeah.
Okay, so please tell him that, you know, talking about
dispatcher.
PDI and mitigation and all of this is not true. I mean, it's true. Tell him I'm not lying, you know.
It is true. And bringing over Avianca, especially, you know, it's a very clear example of miscommunication. And there are also lots of examples. If you, I would love to share these examples with you. I would like to contact you.
I would love to talk about this. I'm really, really interested in aviation. Although I don't have a license myself, but I am interested, you know, in driving lessons from aviation. So we might talk about this, inshallah, you and I, please.
Yeah,
sure. If you go to my Instagram, then you will find all the links to all the social media that you like. So you can talk to me, you know, and everything. You'll find my phone number, TikTok, you know, Snapchat, everything. You'll find there, Facebook and everything.
Sure thing. I would be privileged to do so. I have been following you for a very long time, but silently.
Oh, really? Okay. It's high time we talk now, maybe, doctor.
Yeah, because you have been talking also about rockets and about the spaceships.
Oh, that's with Hind. Yes, exactly. I did. Okay.
Yeah. So thank you very much for this.
No, thank you for your nice comments.
Yeah, it was really, really informative. And I would just like to add the last thing, that for linguists and for teachers, when we talk about applied linguistics, and this is really a very important branch, because while you are teaching, you are doing applied linguistics. So all what you have learned at the faculty, you come to apply it when you start teaching the students. Especially if you are teaching in a multi, cultural context. If you are teaching at an international school where people have different backgrounds, they have different cultural contexts. So, as a teacher, you need to manage this as well. So you need to be knowledgeable. You need to be also flexible. You need to be also able to, how can we put this into words, like assertive, and also at the same time you need to be that kind of a person who can accept others opinions, others backgrounds, others differences.
Can't agree more.
Yeah, communication is not only about communicating a set of words, like when you were talking about other things other than physiology and plain English, you were talking about conveying even the message. When you are talking to somebody and you find that the aha moment come out, or
aha in our context was not very good, so let's not bring this on the table. Because when he said aha, he crashed the plane. I'm joking, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, you
no, thank you very much. Those are very, very deep insights.
This person is suffering. This person is not communicating well because he has something on board.
Our students are not communicating very well either.
And sometimes when you are even talking over the phone, sometimes you are living in a foreign country and you are doing everything over the phone as far as you know. So you are talking to somebody, conveying a problem, but you're not able to convey the message because of language apprehension, or because of lack of communication. Or
I have inshallah presentation that I'm planning on doing soon, inshallah. Okay, so 24 people are here, so it's good to mention it's only a few people. It's a DPU. I'll be talking about the war that killed 20% of the world's population, and nobody has heard of it, and it happened because of misunderstanding, miscommunication. So stay tuned for this.
When would be that? Or these?
It can be in the soon future, inshallah, but I'm not sure when yet.
Okay, I will stay tuned for that, but just please try to announce for it earlier so I can.
Sure.
Yeah.
Will do.
Thank you so much again.
No, thank you, man.
You have a nice day.
You too. Thank you. Anybody else has any comments or questions? Okay. Right. Anything, you can write it in a chat, or you can unmute yourself and talk. Otherwise, I will have to excuse myself. If you're okay with that, guys. You need Telegram. Telegram is on the screen. So if you scan that code using your phone, then it will take you to my Telegram channel. That's if you're talking about my Telegram. If you're talking about Let's Telegram, Maha, would you please put the Telegram channel, your Telegram channel, on the screen, in the chat, so that people can access it? Your Telegram channel. I think Sarah is asking about your Telegram. Sarah, Mohammed, you mean my Telegram channel or Let's Telegram channel? Mine. Okay, mine is on the screen. Okay. No problem, Fatma. That's fine. We finished anyways. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. So Sarah, are you happy? Did you scan the code and everything? Just write in the chat or unmute yourself and you can. Yes, okay. Yeah, very good. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, guys. Any other questions? Anything you did not understand from tonight's session? Any questions? Anything else? All right. I got to bounce that. Okay, thank you very much for subscribing to my YouTube channel. Appreciate it. No, thank you, Fatma, although you joined late. Okay. Thank you, Dia. Thank you, Marwan. Thank you, Sarah, again. Thank you. Outstanding, Dia. Thank you very much.
شكرا لحضرتك جدا.
No, thank you,
أنا حابة بس أفكرهم إن شاء الله بعد بكرة هيبقى معانا دكتور لطفي البجوري. فإن شاء الله يعني ما تنسوش الموعد إن شاء الله 10 مساء توقيت مصر، 11 توقيت السعودية بإذن الله. وشكرا لكم.
All right. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.